So John Muir agreed completely that nature is above humans. He was a Scottish-American author, a naturalist, and a mountaineer. He was founder of the Sierra Club and leader in the American Preservationist movement. And the preservationists just kind of saw nature as good and humans as bad. And he kind of took on one of Thoreau's questions of why there's evil in nature, since it's supposedly divine. And John comes up with it's because God didn't make nature for us. We're not here to manage over it, and it's not solely for us. It's just there as its own being. And then another man that we're going to look at is Aldo Leopold. He was more of he was a conservationist. So he kind of had the thought that humans could be good, but he was also an American author, an ecologist, and a forester. And he was kind of thought of as the father of the American conservation movement. He was a user of environmental resources, and he kind of lived along the lines that we need to live with the land instead of dominating over it. So kind of having symbiotic relationships with it, so that way we can continue living on in a sustainable world. So now we're going to go into the differences between each of the different historical perspectives, which there's three pretty major perspectives. The conservationists, preservationists, and then the social justice perspective. So the conservationists are very involved, and they look at man as above nature, but along with that, they agree that there's right and wrong ways to kind of manage nature, that like Aldo Leopold said, like we can't just dominate over it, while the preservationists are much more hands-off. So they just want to let nature run her course. What will be in their mind. If a certain animal isn't supposed to be alive at a certain time, then nature will kill it off. So humans just kind of like need to stay out of it and mind their own business. Whereas social justice is kind of focused more on equality. So they're kind of looking at like we should be putting resources and money and time into humans as well. Like we need to look at the impacts that environmental movements have on different social classes. And then kind of another perspective or like idea that falls underneath this perspective is if all the toxins were dumped in our own backyard, there'd be a lot less of it. So it's kind of easy not to think about like the pollution going on in the world because it's not at our back door, especially being in the Midwest. We have relatively clean air and water. So we don't really feel a pressuring need to take action or do something about it. But if we were living in China where thousands of people were dying every day because of air pollution, we would probably have done something already. So an example of how these different perspectives kind of work with each other, we went over this example in class, was the reintroduction of wolves on Isle Royale. So there had been wolves on the island before, and then there were also moose, and then a bunch of different trees and things as well. But what had happened was a man brought his dog onto the island illegally because no pets were supposed to be there. And the dog had a disease, and it got spread to the wolves, and so the wolf population just completely plummeted. And then the moose population greatly increased, which then also caused a certain type of tree there to plummet. So conservationists say, yes, like the reintroduction of wolves is good, like it needs to be done to kind of put that balance back in place between the wolves and the moose and the trees and all that, because it's not just those three organisms that are being affected by it. There's a ton of other like bacteria, plants, and then eventually it'll get to other animal species as well. So they see it as very imperative to keep that balance between them, whereas the preservationists say, that's fine. That's how nature wants it to be. If those wolves, if nature wanted those wolves to be there, they would have survived that disease. There's no point in taking other wolves out of their natural habitats to put them into a new place or a new location. And then the social justice, again, would just be like, we can put this energy, time, and money into other things. So all that's going into like the research, the tracking, and the transportation of wolves, if they are to be put back on the Isle Royale, like all of that can be kind of directed more towards like educational funds or feeding the poor, cleaning up communities. So they kind of look at it as helping humans first. But they still have a concern for the environment, but they also want to make sure that there's equitable allocation of resources. So now we're moving on to the ethical perspectives. There's three types of ethical theory. The first one is philosophical. And that's more abstract. So it's just kind of like a reflection on the nature of the good. And then you have normative, just judgment on how to do the good in general. And then you have applied, which is concrete. So this one's kind of in the middle, and this one is how to do the good in a specific field or subject. It's kind of like the do's and don'ts, the rule book. You can kind of think of them as like a pyramid scheme as well. So each of these theories can get grouped into families on how to determine what is good. And we kind of went through and discussed like what good versus evil looks like. But kind of going even further back, the first principle of morality is do good and avoid evil. So looking at the differences between the two, good. So Singer said that good is happiness, or the ability to do what you want, and evil is suffering, which is the inability to do what you want. And it's important to note that suffering is not pain. It's just not being able to do what you want. And so the irreducible good is the avoidance of suffering and the pursuit of happiness. Some other people said that if something is good, it gets you closer to your goal. And something is evil, it gets you further from your goal. And these are character-based ethics here. But then again, you have to look at like what the goal is and whether or not that's good or evil, and how you define good and evil in those terms. So now we'll be talking about the realist versus anti-realist. The realists are discovering ways in which the world works, while the anti-realists are constructing it. So like example would be of a scientist like discovering dinosaur fossils and saying like this is how it is because this is how we found it, whereas the anti-realist like scientist would be constructing the fossils in a way that they believe it should be constructed. So those are two different ideals. And then there's action versus agent. Action looks at the act itself as like kind of a duty or an obligation. So the goodness of your action is determined by external forces, whereas agent looks at the intention of the person doing the act. So the goodness of your action is determined by internal forces. And then the 4 ways of ethical thinking are deontology, utilitarianism, virtue, and justice. So the first one, deontology, is act-based. or no, it's duty-based. Sorry. Duty-based. And they say that an act is right or wrong depending on the act itself. So they kind of follow the golden rule of treating others how you want to be treated. So like if you see a stop sign, you're going to obey it because you kind of put other people up to the same standard that they need to obey stop signs. And they emphasize acting from our principles and our obligations or our duties. So another example would be we recycle because we have like the duty to, not because necessarily because it makes us a better person or because recycling is good, but because or like recycling has a good outcome, but because we have a duty to clean our earth. And then the second one is utilitarianism, also known as consequentialism. And this is outcomes based. So they only look at the results of the act, and the act is good if it produces a net good or a benefit, and the act is bad if it produces a net bad or a deficit. This is the major way of thinking in public policy in America, or North America and Western Europe, which is kind of highly flawed because most often the motivation behind utilitarianism is corrupt. Well, not most often, but it generally shows through. And then a few other flaws is that the consequences are impossible to know with certainty, so you can't always know what the consequences are going to be of your actions. You might like not take into consideration all of the possible consequences, or like what exactly the consequences will be. And then consequences could be judged differently based off of different opinions. Goods could be judged differently. This idea kind of like tries to make better or worse judgments out of different kinds of goods. So it's like comparing apples to oranges. And then it also often ignores fairness. So then the third way of ethical thinking is virtue. This one is act-based. So they emphasize goals and character formation, and they say that the goal or the act is good if it makes you a better person. So it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you become a better person from it, then it's good. But if you're not becoming a better person, then it's bad. And the final one is justice. And this is fairness-based. And again, that's just kind of like the equitable allocation of resources that we have here. Just making sure like they're going to do things that are good because it's fair and equal to all, which would probably be really hard to come to any sort of decision because it's not easy to please everybody. So moving along to human rights versus animal rights. Actually, real quick, just one more thing. Another way of looking at all of these each one is related, and we have all these arrows here, which kind of goes into show that it's all part of the systems thinking, which we brought up earlier. So everything that we think about, the reasons why we do things, our motivation, it's all connected to each other and then to outside forces and inside forces, and then there's even more connections that we can make as we continue to go along. So now we're going to look at the human rights versus animal rights. So the big question is, do rights go beyond human beings? And if so, like where do we draw the line at? Because people notice that like animals are not held accountable for the same duty to uphold rights as humans are. So like we don't say like, we don't put the gorillas in charge of managing waste, and we don't put giraffes in charge of, keep making sure the water's safe to drink, because they have less power than us. They obviously aren't as advanced intelligently as human beings. So with less power comes less obligation. And it's kind of like goes into the thought that plants do photosynthesis because that's all they know how to do. And when I say no,